my
soldiers,
goodness.
and he was an ophthalmologist.
Okay.
So you can imagine with the poison gas and the shrapnel of World War I, what he went through. And he wrote a letter to his parents one time just explaining how he had to take the eyeballs out of 4 living soldiers earlier that morning.
Oh, my gosh.
But when the war was over, he did get a very high honor from the French government, not something that they hand out like candy, but it went to, it has a French name, so I can't remember exactly what it is, but it was an honor, a Medal of Honor that went to non-Frenchmen who did brave and courageous things for the French in World War I.
Wow.
And just a regular guy from Erie, PA.
Unreal. So was he a doctor after all that then?
Ophthalmologist.
Ophthalmologist
yes.
After the war.
Yeah.
Wow. Did he come back to Erie?
No, he ended up in Philadelphia. And
Okay.
Ended up dying in the 1920s, I believe. Maybe. That escapes me right now.
Yeah.
He didn't live an extra long life. I know
Okay.
that. But he ended up dying in a soldiers and sailors home in Philadelphia.
That's unreal. Again, there's a name that we've never heard of, really. Hunter Scarlett.
Yeah, he is in the local Erie Sports Hall of Fame now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. The talk about when did it get on the radar of professional football around here?
Around here?
Well, I mean, as far as guys that maybe could make a living as football players.
Well, I don't think anybody really made a living at it until until about the 1970s, probably.
Seriously, yeah.
Right. I mean, you hear those stories. Terry Pluto from the Cleveland Plain Dealer wrote a great book about the 1964 Cleveland Browns that won the NFL championship, and he talked about all the different players, and in the off season they would paint houses, and another guy was an insurance salesman, and that's what they had to do to get by.
I mean, this is the era of Jim Brown, right? I mean,
yeah. Well, even he left pro football to get into the movies.
Yeah, to be an actor, right?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
He said he could. I think Paul Brown, who was the owner of the Browns at the time, I think wanted him to take a pay cut, maybe work for the same. He was only 29 when he retired. He was at the top of his career, but he said, the heck with this. I can make a lot more money in the movies if that's the issue.
Yeah. What was it, The Dirty Dozen? Or something?
Dirty Dozen was the first one. Yeah, that
was a great movie. Yeah.
Yeah, he was in another one with Raquel Welch too. I remember that, but can't remember the name of it. I remember her though.
Right, of course. But they started entering into the pros at some point?
No, actually, even before that, in the 1920s, there was a fellow from East High, Tommy Dollar, just from a regular Erie family. He was a great athlete. He played at Colgate in college and played with a team called the Brooklyn Dodgers in the 1920s.
Football team
called the Brooklyn Dodgers, right. Wow. And there was a number of guys like that. Let's see, Ed Paskey from the mid-40s played for Academy. Sig Andrusting from East High from the 30s. Joe Kravonic, here's an example for you. Joe Kravonic played for Tech and University of South Carolina, and he was with a team, I think they were called the Miami Seahawks, professional team. They were in the old AFL, and he actually quit playing football and dedicated his life to the Boy Scouts of America. And that's how he spent his career. So football was pretty much an extracurricular activity, as they say. It's not even an extracurricular activity in college anymore. They're getting paid big bucks.
That is really a perspective to remember that again, it was maybe something that you did on the side, in supplement or of your regular career. That's amazing.
I think the first NFL player that would be considered the NFL player, he actually played for the Buffalo All-Americans, was a fellow named Oscar Anderson, Aki, they used to call him, Ock Anderson. He graduated, I think, about 1914 from Erie High School, and he was a great player, a quarterback, just a high-scoring, great ball carrier, and he was All-American at Colgate as well. And
did Erie High and did the suburbs have football teams pretty early on?
Well, when Erie High,
and we're talking about Academy, right?
Well, no, we're talking about Erie, which was at 10th and Sassafras Street, which
the old Tech
later became Central.
Right.
In the 1920s, say from 1920 to 1929. Then in 1930, the entire student body and faculty moved out to the brand new school of Strong Vincent. So their colors were red and black ever since the original Erie High to Old Central High, and then Strong Vincent stayed red and black. And one interesting little note, Strong Vincent, of course, was called the Colonels, and everybody thinks they were called the Colonels because of Strong Vincent. That's really not the case. When it was Central High School, they were called the Fighting Colonels, and that name just happened to follow the student body and the faculty when they moved out to the new school of Strong Vincent.
But they had a team, and where do you remember? Where did they play? Any idea?
Well, the old Erie High School. They played at there used to be a football field at about 7th and Cherry. I forget what they called it.
Yeah.
There was also a field on West 10th Street, where the between Peach and Sassafras on the south side, there's a church there now. I forget the name of the church.
Yeah.
It'd be kind of kitty corner from the cathedral.
Yeah.
But more in the middle of the block. I know they played there. Erie High School started football probably in the 1890s. There's not real competent evidence, but you can get pretty good records from about 1900 on. And then when East was founded, like in 1919, and Academy around the same time, they had football teams right away, really.
Okay.
Yeah, and then Tech, once the new school of Strong Vincent was built, the old Central High School sat vacant for a year. Then in 1931, that became Technical High School.
Right. So did they end up having games behind Strong Vincent in that field?
I don't recall any.
Because at some point they had to move to Veterans Memorial Stadium, right?
That opened in 1924.
Okay.
Okay, and before that, they used to play at what was called Athletic Field, which is today Ainsworth Field. I don't recall any official games behind Strong Vincent because actually it's not even really an official size.
It isn't?
The way that
Okay.
there used to be a track that went around and it kind of cut off the corners.
Right.
I remember playing there in grade school a couple of times.
Explain to the listener, and we got to take a break soon, but people need to understand what a game like a Vincent Academy, Vincent East. They were insane back in the day, right?
Yeah, they were huge. Football was big in Erie, particularly after the war, not just in Erie, but everywhere. You know, the returning GIs, and it was before television, and people were looking for things to do. And I think in 1946, 1947, Tech and Vincent playing at the Erie Stadium, 18,000 fans. You know, and it was routine to have 14,000, 16,000. When Prep played Tech in 1946, with all the returning veterans and the people interested in the game and kids sneaking over that east wall when it used to be real small at the stadium, there was about probably 22, 23,000. And the official account is somewhere around 21,500, but that doesn't count the senior passes, the bands,
right,
the cheerleaders, everybody that snuck in. About 23,000 were at that game.
Who won?
Tech won that game. I think it was 14-7.
He says as a rambler.
Yeah.
We'll be back with Judge Dan Brabender here getting a little history. Pretty amazing stuff. If you have a question for him, send me a text, 814-679-1080. having fun with some nostalgia and memories about football greats in Erie, Pennsylvania. Judge Dan Brabender is with us here, and Judge, you said in one team there were two NFL greats. Tell us that story.
In the backfield, right? Academy in 1936 had a good football team, and football was considered by college coaches in Erie in the 1930s to be a very good brand. But
out of Erie
right.
was known for it,
yes.
huh?
And two fellows that played for Academy, Bob Thurbin and Al Grigo, both went to the University of South Carolina. There was a coach, Rex Enright, who loved the ethnic grit of Erie boys, particularly on the east side. And,
really?
Yeah, he recruited innumerable. In fact, I think it was the 1940 South Carolina Gamecocks. Out of their starting 11, I mean, now that's when 11 played offense, 11 played defense.
Right.
They were on the punt teams, they were on the kickoff teams. Out of the 11, 7 of them at one point were the 7 of the 11 starters were from Erie.
That is a phenomenal story.
Yeah. And I don't think anybody in decades has played football at South Carolina from Erie, but the scribes down there, in the Carolinas, when a game was coming up, they'd say, well, North Carolina's coming in town to play Erie University. Yeah. And both those guys made the NFL as well.
Did they really?
Yeah. There were, there was a handful of Tech guys, Ken Webb from Academy, Al Grago, Bob Thurbin from Academy. There were, I'd have to think about it.
I feel like, because we kind of experienced this in more recent years, since the 2000s, with Iowa and Mike Mitchler at Prep, where there's like this synergy where a D1 school can get fed by,
right.
A trusted high school coach, right?
Very true, very true. I have it right here, actually.
Yeah.
USC's starting 11, 6 out of the 11 were Stan Nowak from Tech, a fellow named Hatkovich, Kravonik, which I mentioned, the guy that was in the Boy Scouts, Steve Nowak from Tech, Al Grigo, DeWitt Aerosmith from East High. He died in the war, World War II. And then here's what it was: the 7th, Krotozinski was his name. He was the first player off the bench, and he was from Erie. So
that is fabulous.
And they did well. South Carolina, good football school.
Yeah. Well, I mean, while we're talking about the war, obviously the underage kids are still playing football here, but did they go into the service necessarily versus they wouldn't have been able to be recruited for college, did they?
If you were drafted, you had to go.
Yeah,
There's no question about that. Plus, there was a real spirit of patriotism,
absolutely,
too. And many athletes in any sport, Major League Baseball, football, their careers were halted by 2, 3, 4 years in the service. Guys, you look at guys like Ted Williams, he had such great career stats. If he'd have had those years during the war to add to that, it would have been really incredible. Bob Feller, pitcher for the Indians, another one.
Well, yeah, and I'm thinking about everybody knows the series, The Band of Brothers, and one of the patrol leaders, one of the lieutenants, was Buck Compton. He was a superstar at UCLA, and then he was a college man, and then went into the war as an officer. And it kind of that athleticism meant a lot.
And I actually have a list in this book of. Might take me a minute to find it.
Of like veterans or something,
of Erie athletes who died in World War II.
Oh my gosh!
City of Erie athletes, I believe.
Yeah. We're talking a lot about city, but what about county? Again, you had a lot more high schools back then. I'm thinking about, you didn't have an Iroquois. You had Lawrence Park and Wesleyville,
correct,
right?
Exactly.
And they all had teams?
Yeah, more than just them. I mean, like Cranesville had a high school. Springboro had a high school.
Right.
I believe that's in Crawford County. But there were a lot smaller schools, and they were smaller their squads were smaller as well. So it was very Erie. I'm sorry, like schools like Academy and East were considered huge major schools.
Really? Yeah.
And it'd be tough for a team from Albion to play East or Academy. Now Prep was smaller at the time too, so and then they would schedule the Northeast or Albion, in the 1920s and 1930s schools like that.
What about like McDowell? When was McDowell established versus like Mill Creek High?
Yeah. Mill Creek High started football in 1928.
Okay.
And originally they were known as West Mill Creek High. Mm-hmm. That area really is in West Mill Creek, where it was way out on West Ridge Road. In 1954, it became McDowell High School.
Gotcha.
And they were in the county league until, I believe, the late 40s, and then they got a little bit too big for those smaller schools. Like Waterford had a team before, or Edinburgh had a team. The Edinburgh Turtles, they were called.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And they were a little bit too small to play the city schools, but too big to play the county schools. But then they started playing. They were considered a Class A team. I'd say about probably the late 40s, and then they were regularly playing the East Vincent's Academy.
Did we play? Did our big schools play Pittsburgh schools, either City League or Whippy schools?
Did better than that. Academy would travel to Atlanta, Georgia, to play at Atlanta Tech or Richmond Academy. They traveled to Louisville, Saginaw, Michigan. East High played would play down in Steubenville. They played in Ashland, Kentucky. In fact, Ashland, Kentucky was the national champs by popular acclaim for a couple of years. East went down there by train. Took them a couple of days to get there, and they upset Ashland, Kentucky. And when this was about 1931, and when they came back to town, they said there was such a mob of people at Union Station greeting those football players as they came back to Erie. It was really something.
That is something. We've got to take our bottom of the hour break here. We've got Judge Dan Brabender. We're just talking about some of the football greats that come out of Erie County and where they went. And when we come back, he's got a poignant conversation about that the athletes, the student athletes from Erie schools who passed away, who died in the war, they were killed in action. We'll be back with that and more of the modern day superheroes of football here as the Joel Natale Show continues. Appreciate you tuning in to Talk Erie and the Joel Natale Show. We are live from our Kingdom Financial Group studio here at 5th and State, also live on Facebook and YouTube. Judge Daniel Brabender is with us. He is probably the foremost expert on high school student athletes in Erie County, and we're glad to have you back here, Judge, to talk about football greats and where they went. And but right now, it's pretty poignant, the number of athletes that we lost during the war.
Yeah, one was Jack Laraway. He was an East High student, went on to star in college as well. He died in a plane crash in World War II, but when I was researching his life, I came across or compiled a list of many excellent high school athletes from Erie who died in World War II. I have the list here. I can give it to you in alphabetical order if you like.
I mean, it goes. It's a lot. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll try to make it quick. Clarence Adams from the Academy class of 44, killed in action in the Philippines. Donald Adams, Academy class of 39, killed in action in France. DeWitt Aerosmith, he was one of those South Carolina boys. He was killed in action in France. Al Bernardini from Academy class of 41, killed in Germany. John Buckland, East 37, killed in Germany. Johnny Chimeni was a great athlete. East class of 1938, killed in France. Alcine Flacco, Academy 42, killed in Burma. I mean, these guys were all over the world fighting. I mean, I could go on and on. Bill Coyne from East, class of 42, killed in action in the Pacific.
Wow, he was, 18, 19?
Jack Dishinger, East High 37, killed in Japan. Edgar Gaudio died of wounds in the Philippines. He was from East 35. John Jablonski from Tech, class of 44, killed in France. Harry Kotowski was one of Erie's greatest track runners. He cleaned up at the stadium his senior year for East. He was killed in action in France. Charles Kettering, Vincent, 39, killed in France on D-Day. Jack Knox, killed in the South Pacific, Vincent, 41. Walter Lundstrom, East 41, killed in action in France. Carl Mango from Academy, he was a little older, class of 24.
That's what they named the boys' baseball league
Exactly.
after.
They had a league named
Carl
after
Mango.
Carl Mango.
Wow.
And everybody wondered who the heck was Carl Mango.
Right.
Well,
Wow.
now you know. He was
a war hero.
Yeah, he was a war hero. He was killed in the Philippines. Johnny Marabito from your Little Italy over there.
Yeah.
Vincent, class of 36, killed in Germany. Clem Martin, one of the greatest track stars. He was one of they called him the Miracle Milers or something. He was a mile champion. He died of wounds in North Africa. Vincent, 40. Lee Nyberg, Vincent, class of 32, died of wounds in France. Richard Pratt from Vincent, class of 40, killed in Italy in 1944. Harold Pataskowitz from East, class of 41, killed in action in Luxembourg. Giocondo Ruffini, he was a basketball star at Vincent, class of 42. He was in the Air Force, killed in China. Dan Snell was a football star. He and his twin were stars. This one died of wounds in Belgium, Academy 32. Joe Sirachi from Vincent, class of 39, killed in France. Walter Trout from Academy 41, killed in Austria. And Jimmy Ut, who would be Jerry Utt's brother from the Vincent class of 44, he was killed just weeks before the war ended. April 6th of 1945, he was killed. And if you recall, I believe it was about April 30th when Hitler was killed. And so it was about a month before the war was over. I mean, if
was it in Europe that he passed?
In Germany.
In Germany,
so he was that far. I mean, he
oh my gosh,
just did not make it to the end of the war. And this is a list I compiled. I mean, there could very well be more. I mean, I concentrated mostly on basketball, football, and track.
Right.
So, I mean, there could have been other swimmers and...
Well, you know, you mentioned a couple of things. You mentioned some fellas that literally had gotten their high school degree, went overseas, and didn't make it within months. And then you have some that were obviously probably dads, fathers, you know, the guys that graduated, you know, from in the mid-30s.
Right.
And, you know, probably established families, either were drafted or enlisted and didn't make it.
Yeah,
wow.
it mentioned swimmers. There were a pair of swimmers John Nelson, he was from the Vincent class of 1966, and Dave Callahan from the Tech class of 1966. Both these boys were killed in Vietnam, and their lives were so parallel. They were born a month apart. They were drafted into Vietnam, or no, they joined. They enlisted 1 month apart.
Wow.
They were sent to Vietnam exactly 1 month apart, and they were both killed north of Saigon there 1 month apart. And I actually, when I was in Washington, D.C., I visited the Vietnam War Memorial, and I'm sure you've been there. You've seen all those panels. I think there's 28 panels or something of that nature, and their panels, there's 140 panels, actually, of the names of the dead, and theirs are just 2 panels apart. And they were both almost at the same eye length, horizontal.
Wow.
And that's a pretty sad story.
And they were both swimmers.
They were great swimmers. They were rivals. One was for Tech, one was for Vincent. But they knew each other, competing against each other in water polo, things like that. But how similar their lives were. You know, they were born a month apart, died a month apart. In between, everything was 1 month apart in their lives.
That really puts the sports in perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We've been saying that that after the war is really when the NFL really got some steam, and you started getting some big names, what the Johnny Unitas and the big heroes. And we had some NFL heroes here in Erie, right?
Oh, yes, we do. Talking about Johnny Unitas, though, I think football really became of age. They talk about the 1958 NFL championship game. To this day, they say it's the greatest game ever played. It's the first overtime game ever in football. And Johnny Unitas was a star of the Baltimore Colts, and they defeated the New York Giants in overtime 23-17. And I was a little boy sitting on my dad's lap, and I recall that's the first time I ever remember watching a football game on TV, and that was in December of 1958. But the game was so great, and so many people watched it on TV, then football started to explode. Now it's out of control. Almost every Division I game is televised somewhere.
There's no doubt about it. There are some football greats, and we should probably just start at the top and share a little bit about Fred Biletnikoff and his brother, because you taught me about how his brother was a major athlete as well.
Bobby Biletnikoff was a tremendous athlete. In fact, I said he was probably, as far as high school athletes are concerned, Erie's greatest high school athlete. Wow. He was all-state in football and basketball. He was a great baseball player. When a baseball game would be done, he'd run over to the stadium and compete in the high jump, things like that.
Goodness.
And he went to University of Miami actually on a football scholarship. And that's when freshmen were ineligible. He was a freshman team quarterback. They went undefeated. When he was a sophomore at Miami, the Hurricanes, he broke all the sophomore records for a passing quarterback. He did get injured midway through his junior year, and his backup came in and did pretty well. And that's when he decided, well, I'm going to turn to baseball. And he was, now Miami of Florida, of course, is a tremendous collegiate baseball school. Bobby Biletnikoff is the first Miami Hurricane ever to be drafted into Major League Baseball.
Wow.
And now there's just hundreds of them. But
Right.
Bobby played in the New York Yankees system, and he was elevated to AAA by age 21. In fact, he was the heir apparent to Mickey Mantle. They wanted him to take over Mantle's position in center field, but they might have promoted him a little too soon.
Okay.
Maybe kept him, in the minors a little bit longer. He had difficulty after a while hitting the curveball because his eyesight started to get a little bad. And he decided after several years to get out of baseball, and the New York Jets wanted him back in football, but I think he concentrated on golf after that.
Okay. Well, that's not a terrible thing.
And Freddie, he's known for football, but he was a great basketball player and a great baseball player as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm very encouraged and gratified how Erie has really given Fred his due, because he deserves all those accolades,
And, there was such a misconception about Fred Biletnikoff because he made that statement after he was named the MVP that he said he hopes Erie falls into the lake. Let me tell you, I know Freddie. I've talked to him several times. He loves Erie, PA. If you ever 100%. Sat around and talked to him over a beer or a glass of wine, he talks about the boys' club in the Lower East Side, and he talks about this Erie kid and that Erie kid. He will go on and on and on. He loves Erie, PA. I guarantee you that.
For sure. Tell us a little bit about his journey again.
Well, Freddie, of course, played for Tech. He wasn't just a football star. He got the award for being the number one basketball player in the City Series when he was a senior for Tech. They had a great team as well.
Yeah.
And, of course, he played baseball. And he went to Florida State. And they had a good quarterback when he played at Florida State.
That's Tallahassee?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
And Steve Tensey was a quarterback. And he used to love to throw to Biletnikoff, and he led the nation in catches, and of course, then one of the.
He only played one side, right? He didn't play as a safety or anything.
No. By that time, it was two platoon football.
Yeah.
And of course, at Tech, he did. Of course,
right.
In high school, he played everywhere all the time.
Yeah.
But he opted to go into the AFL.
Okay.
With the Oakland Raiders rather than accept an offer, and at the time, the NFL wanted to keep its reputation as being the league. But now, the AFL started signing guys like Freddie Biletnikoff and Joe Namath, and sooner or later they had to have the Super Bowl between the two leagues.
Yep.
1967 was the first Super Bowl. Super Bowl III, it was an American Football League team that won it. Joe Namath and the New York Jets. And after that, eventually they combined to become the sole NFL.
How is when it comes to the Raiders now, the Vegas Raiders? Is Fred still revered in that system?
I'm sure he is.
Yeah,
in football generally, he is.
Yeah.
They still talk about him. If you watch a game, his name will come up.
Absolutely.
Or somebody's is a potential winner of the Biletnikoff Award.
Right. Yeah. Let's talk about some of the other big NFL stars, and we were mentioning off air Art
Baker.
Art
yes.
Baker, yeah.
I'll tell you, Art Baker was a tough guy. Football and wrestling were his sports. In fact, he's the only athlete to this day to be in college on a national championship in a team sport, football. They were national champions, Syracuse in 1959. And he was also the national NCAA winner in wrestling.
Oh,
he was
my goodness.
The champion, and he's the only one to have that distinction of being a team national winner and an individual national winner to this day.
So he was an Orangeman in '59.
Yeah, he played for Academy, and there were a lot of Baker brothers.
Okay.
Willie Baker, Charlie Baker, they were all great athletes for Academy.
Where did Art play NFL then after?
He played with the Buffalo Bills. He had a nice little career, but then there was a AFL NFL war to get a running back named Cookie Gilchrist. I don't know if you remember that name.
No.
And they paid this guy a lot of money, and he was very good for the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah.
But he sort of took over that fullback position.
Okay.
And kind of led to Baker easing himself out of pro football.
That makes sense that a wrestler could be a legitimate fullback and being able to to open those holes for the halfback.
Well, in the halfback, Ernie Davis was
goodness,
the great the number one draft choice in the NFL. Unfortunately, he died of leukemia.
Oh, wow.
But the coach at Syracuse says, "Hey, Ernie Davis is great. Art Baker's the one that makes this team go."
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
How about some other modern greats?
Can't forget my alma mater, guys like Mike McCoy, 11-year career. He was great for Green Bay Packers.
Notre Dame, right?
Notre Dame, class of 70 from Notre Dame.
Played with Mike Kelly, my understanding is.
Yes. They were opponents, actually, in high school. Mike Kelly was a star tackle for Butler.
Okay.
And they played against each other and then played together at Notre Dame. But Mike McCoy, we mentioned the Heisman Trophy before. I mean, that always goes to a quarterback or some tremendous running back. Mike McCoy actually came in 6th in Heisman Trophy voting. That's being a defensive lineman. He came in 6th his senior year at Notre Dame.
Oh, my goodness.
And, of course, we have Mark Stepnoski from Prep, All-Pro. He had a fantastic career playing center.
Where did he go to college, Mark?
He went to Pitt.
Okay.
Where Joe Moore also coached. I didn't mention he also coached.
Right,
at
of
Pitt.
course, yeah.
How could I forget that?
Yeah.
Have somebody like some of those Pitt guys will come and chew me out if I didn't bring that up.
So Stepnoski, where did he play again? I forgot.
At Pitt.
In NFL.
Oh my God. I got a mental block. Was he the Cowboys?
Maybe, yeah. We're
I can't believe I have a mental block here about Stepnoski.
Yeah.
Did he play for he played for two teams. Did he play for the Titans as well?
We'll look it up here.
Somebody's got to email me in.
Right.
I'm losing my mind on this one.
But yeah, I mean, again, a lot of prep stars.
Bobby Sanders was the NFL Defensive Player of the Year.
Played for the Cowboys and also the Oilers.
Houston Oilers.
Yeah,
I was thinking Titans.
Yeah, you were on the right track, right?
It was the Cowboys.
Yeah. But with Bob Sanders, now that was quite a player there. An MVP.
I remember watching him when he was in 10th grade, playing for Prep, and they really didn't have him starting much on offense, and he played some defense. And I'm watching this little guy. You know how some of those professional players, when a guy's going down, then that defensive back comes in and just levels a guy.
Right.
And he was doing that in 10th grade. And I'm looking at this kid. I'm saying, man, this kid is good. You got to have him out there all the time, offense and defense.
Wow.
And by the next year, he was, of course. He was a great high school player. He was a great collegiate player at Iowa, and a great professional athlete too, and a good person.
Well, and that I think his coach was Tony Dungy, right, at the Indianapolis Colts.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
I mean that had to be an incredible experience,
And Mike Mishler, of course.
Of course, yeah, absolutely. Couple more. We just have a few more minutes with Judge Dan Brabender. I'm trying to think of who do we have.
Well, there's some younger
right
guys from your school, Mercier's Prep. Eric Hicks and Jovan Johnson played a year with the Steelers.
That's right, yeah.
Hicks had a long career with Kansas City.
And, of course, James Connors.
Connor, can't forget him. Boy. Wow. Man, you watch him, he looks like Jimmy Brown carrying the ball,
Really tough nose.
I don't know why Pittsburgh got rid of him. Harris is a good running back, but I'll tell you, James Connor is a good one. Plus, he's from Erie. We want the Erie game.
we do, yeah.
Clifton Crosby's another one from East High. Great athlete. Played at Maryland. Played with the Colts.
Yeah.
Cliff Crosby, East High School. Oh, here's a good one, too. Bernie Flowers from Tech. Played for Purdue. That was a pipeline, too. There was a famous coach from Erie, a great Erie athlete called Stu Holcomb was his name. And he ended up becoming the head football coach at Muskingum, a couple of small schools. Then he went to Miami of Ohio, which was considered the cradle of coaches. And then he went on to Purdue, and he would get a lot of Erie boys going to these schools where he coached at. Findlay he coached at, too.
Yeah.
That's where guys like Babe Harkins and a lot of those old names from Erie played for him at Findlay. But Bernie Flowers, Kwiatkowski, is the last name, one of, I think, 16 kids that grew up on the tracks up there on 19th Street.
Wow.
He was a great receiver, All-American for Purdue. He passed away not too long ago, a few years ago, but he was so famous in West Lafayette, Indiana, that the most famous drive-in restaurant there, they name a hamburger after him.
Oh, my gosh.
The Bernie Flowers special or something like that.
He was a Boilermaker. Wow.
Yeah. He played with the Colts for a short while. Then he got married, and I guess his wife told him that's the end of football for you. You get a job to make some money.
Do you think we still have that reputation of hatching stars in sports around here?
You'd like to think so, but boy, there's so many teams and so many players, and I think Erie has always had its fair share. Basketball's another story. We've only had one basketball player from Erie play in the NBA, S.C. Hollis.
Is that it?
He's the only one.
Wow.
Of course, there's such fewer number of basketball players as professionals in football.
Well, and this might be a show for another time, but part of, I think, the issue is not necessarily in football. Football has stayed in the high schools, but all the other sports, basketball, baseball, these travel teams or these specialty schools are where they're developing all this talent, right? I mean,
yeah, they sure are. I'm not a big fan of all that,
Yeah.
but I'm old school.
Right.
I'm what you call a sports purist. You know what I mean? But it doesn't appear it's turning back. And this NIL business with the colleges is just out of control.
Yeah,
Really is.
well. It has been really a delight to have you with us to share some of this expertise and some of this history.
Always enjoy talking to you.
Oh yeah. Let's mention real quick your new second volume.
Yes,
Go ahead.
Erie Sensational Murder Trials. The original was Erie's #1 bestseller of any book in the years 2022 and 2023.
Fantastic.
That's according to Warner's and Amazon. Just recently released is Erie Sensational Murder Trials Volume 2. And that's also available at Warner's, and it's also at lulu.com, their bookstore, lulu.com. And pretty much the same thing. I've dissected 9 very interesting, compelling Erie, PA murder cases.
Yeah.
I mean, they're real Erie cases, if you know what I'm saying.
Will you come back and talk through? We'll go through some of the stories.
Oh, yeah.
That would be fantastic.
Love to. Thank you so much.
Judge Daniel Brabender with us here on Talk Erie and the Joel Natale Show. Take care of yourself, bro. We have got 4 minutes in front of 5.